History presentation about imperialism. Imperialism is the idea of expanding a nation's border and influence onto foreign land. The mentality and wish for imperialism led to rapid colonization of many parts of the world. One of the earliest and most famous examples of imperialism would be the Roman Empire. Rome spread its influence and power throughout vast territories in Europe and North Africa. Later examples of imperialism could be the two eras known as Old Imperialism and New Imperialism. The era of Old Imperialism takes its place from the 1600s to the 1800s. This era included enthusiastic exploration of the world and furthermore colonization of these parts. The era of New Imperialism took its place from the 1870s well into the 1900s. This era mostly included establishment of trade routes and great empires across the globe. Make an account of the main reasons for imperialism. Discuss their importance. Many reasons or causes are given for the nation's appetite for imperialism in the two eras of imperialism. In the text, The Age of Imperialism, the causes are divided into four categories: economic reasons, military political reasons, humanitarian reasons, religious reasons, and at last technological reasons. If you were to pick a course that was most prominent during this era, it would be economics. A well-established economy meant power and affluent nations could outperform other nations on many fronts, both regarding military and technological. Colonizing the world meant fantastic opportunities for trade, harvesting of resources, and cheap labor. These were all factors that contributed to a prosperous economy. The course of imperialism that was military and political reasons came in second place. This does not mean that they weren't important. They were very important, for without them the trading would not be possible. Military influence was very important since it provided the means to effective and safe trading. It was important to establish harbors across the continents to ensure that trading and military vessels had the chance of safe labor and restocking of resources. The humanitarian and religious reasons of imperialism also played its part. The spreading of modern European culture and Christianity to the rest of the world played a crucial part in colonizing the world. Some believed that they, as a superior race, had the duty and the obligation to inform and educate the so-called lower races. This mentality is present and it led to many African and Asian countries being very influenced by Western culture. This is still visible to this day. How does Jules Ferry justify imperialism? The given source is the speech on French colonial expansion 1884 by Jules François Camille Ferry, which was held before the Chamber of Deputies in France. Jules Ferry was a French politician who lived from 1832 until 1893. The speech was held on March 28, 1884. Jules Ferry speaks about the relations between France and Europe, Africa and Asia, and colonial policy. Throughout the speech, he argues for colonization of Asia and Africa. Ferry expresses that the development of the market in the modern industrialized nations increases France's need for export. He states that because Germany is setting up trade barriers and the US have become protectionists, the need for export is increasing. Hence, France should seek this market in foreign land. These are examples of the economic causes which led France to colonization. Ferry goes on to talk about the superior race's right and duty towards the inferior races. Ferry points out that this duty calls upon the superior race to act with generosity, with grandeur, and with sincerity. He then explains that the French colonial policy has already led to annexation of Saigon, Indochina, which is today's Vietnam, Tunisia and Madagascar. Furthermore, he expresses how crucial safe harbors are for the French Navy. The following quote captures his message. A warship cannot carry more than 2 weeks' supply of coal, hence the need to have places of supply, shelters, ports for defense and provisioning. And that is why we need Tunisia, Saigon and Indochina, and that is why we need Madagascar, and why we shall never leave them. In this quote, Færdig explains and justifies the colonization of Tunisia, Saigon, Indochina and Madagascar. He does this by empathizing on the importance of safe harbors. The quote also clearly tells us his visions and ambitions regarding further colonization of Africa and Asia. When one is to ask the question, how does Jules Ferry justify imperialism, you would arrive at 3 various factors that answers this question. 1. He argues that colonization will lead to export, which will then lead to prosperity. 2. He argues that the French, as a superior race, has a duty to civilize the inferior race. 3. The French Navy has a need for safe harbors across the globe, which can only be achieved through colonization. The second part of the task sounds, what does the source say about the historical period? The source gives a clear picture of the mindset of the colonizers. If you, for example, looked at the statements about superior and inferior races, you could see that such statements would cause outrage today, but in this period it was completely acceptable and a commonly shared viewpoint. The source is great at answering these questions because it is a clear view of Jules Ferry's ideas and his positions on colonization. It's very authentic since it is a first-hand and a primary source, hence the direct words of Ferry. The text is institutional, which causes the language to be very formal. The speech is biased because Ferry obviously has a clear goal of increasing France's colonial status. His goals and admiration for colonialism shows when he speaks about colonization. For example, but in our time, I maintain that European nations acquit themselves with generosity, with grandeur, and with sincerity of their superior civilizing duty. This statement carries a lot of positive words, which shows his appreciation of colonization. And vice versa, he is very hostile towards policy that does not appreciate colonization. This shows in the speech, for example, in a Europe, or rather in a universe thus constituted, a policy of withdrawal and abstention is simply the high road to decadence. In this statement, he uses the word decadence, which is another word for decay and collapse, and this carries a very negative tone. Slut, Brot.